Chapter 10. The Crown Victoria was reflecting the midday sunlight when Hector put it in park outside Frankie's house. She walked across the short lawn and met Hector with a hug at his car. He was nervous to see her, and he was anxious about the full day they had ahead of them. His body was shakier than usual, and his mind was busy crafting endless, hypothetical scenarios. Things like food poisoning, engines catching fire, and various heat stroke symptoms filled his imagination as he drove from the old house to her place. That was until those same nerves caused his mind to go blank as she buckled up in the passenger seat beside him. Her demeanor was tight as well, and he couldn't tell whether or not she was red-eyed from a late night or for some other reason. They got situated in the car, and Hector could tell Chromefoot liked her despite the initial nerves. "Coffee?" he asked. "Absolutely, yes," Frankie replied with a relieved voice. "Late night?" Hector joked, attempting to lighten his own nerves. "How did you know? Are my eyes that red?" "Aw, man, they're red, aren't they?" she said with concern. "The night was really good, but a little heavy." "One of those. Got it," he answered, making an internal pledge to cease asking questions. Jules was up late with relationship fun. She's got a lot going on. A recent ex from the past just resurfaced, so it's been a bit messy. "Sounds hectic," Hector agreed as the gossip allowed for some comfort. "Yeah, and she's pretty torn up. She's been with this new dude for almost 8 months. They're talking about getting a place and all that stuff, and then her ex, the one that crushed her heart a few years ago, shows up and starts asking her to come back, says he wants to get married." "Wow, just a little bit selfish there." "Exactly. And this is the guy she wanted to be with, so I'm trying to be a good friend, but I also want to be an honest coach as well." "Coach Frankie." "Exactly, and it's difficult to watch this ex-dude come back and just lay waste to the new foundation Jules started putting together after their breakup." "Awful, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say." "Don't be, she'll be alright. And just saying this stuff out loud, I already feel so much better." It was already hot. It was Memorial Day weekend, and he could feel the early summer temperature rise as they drove from Frankie's apartment back to Pasadena. Lake Street Congregational Church sat quiet and impressive above the Pasadena freeway. It had a massive cross in front of its chapel entrance with some tree cover below. Hector's iced coffee chilled his fingers as he walked back and forth by the church steps. He took a sip and handed his cup to Frankie so he could shoot photos of a cement ledge running along the sidewalk next to the church stairs. The church was built in 1988, and about a year later Pat Brennan was skating there, utilizing the cement ledges to perform tricks that had never been done. One of these tricks was a high-speed nollie nose slide that was noteworthy because of Pat's speed, his style, and the fact that in 1991 almost no one had the skill set for such a technical trick on any obstacle that stood taller than a curb. Frankie squinted behind her black sunglasses. The freeway traffic roared below. It reminded Hector of how prominent that sound was in the videos of Pat Brennan skating there. Almost every skate film Hector had seen included a soundtrack of music accompanying the tricks. But with Pat Brennan's skating cued to Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, there were 3 elements that played key roles beyond the skating and the music. There was the roar of the Pasadena freeway, the still quiet of the parking lots, and the hard-to-explain levels of emptiness surrounding all the places he performed his tricks. They got back in the car and drove a few minutes to Pasadena City College. To Hector, the pavement outside the college planetarium was the best representation of all the empty spaces he'd explored over the years. It reminded him of all the nights, skating across the emptiness and quiet of Downey's business parks, strip malls, and office buildings. Places where the only elements present seemed to be Hector, his board, and the sound of the city grid in the firmament. It was like the comfort of a wood fire to him. Early in his 20s, he'd fallen into the habit of taking photos of places that affected him with that same amplified stillness. "So, what is it about this empty spread of blacktop that is so special to you?" Frankie asked, holding a cool water bottle to her head. "Right where I'm standing is important," Hector announced. "It's probably right about here that Pat Brennan did a 360 late shove-it, which at the time was technically completely insane." "What does that translate to in non-skate dialects?" "A technically advanced, groundbreaking maneuver," he replied with an expert's tone while shaking the ice in his clear plastic cup. "And beyond that specific trick, this skater in this film you're talking about had that big of an influence on you?" His skating just opened up my entire world, period. The Beethoven, the tricks, the gear he dressed in. These empty parking lots Pat skated looked and sounded a lot like all the places I'd go in Downey. But this planetarium architecture in the background looked a lot more inspiring than the grocery store parking lots I was frequenting at the time. "Who are you?" she laughed as she handed him a water bottle. "I'm just saying that," he paused before continuing. "If you're gonna hang out with me, be ready to spend some quality time in empty paved lots. A lot of kids grow up with camping. I grew up exploring business parks." Under the afternoon sun, the shadows began to stretch. The freeway reflected the Pasadena heat onto the green sedan from all sides. Holiday weekend traffic was always slow, but it opened up to higher speeds as they drove further inland on the 210 freeway. Once they passed Glendora, the flow of traffic moved more swiftly to the city of Upland. There was nothing special about Pioneer Junior High in terms of its structural design. Throughout the 1980s and the 1990s, the paved embankments behind the school's classrooms were perfect for the acts of pushing, carving, and popping tricks. To Hector's surprise, the banks were freshly paved and smooth when they arrived. At Frankie's request, Hector walked back to the car to grab his board. Pushing around helped demonstrate the routes different skate legends had taken, as well as the different styles and moves that had been documented there. Frankie stood on the board and took several pushes into a carve up and over an embankment, which caused her to yell, "Holy shit!" as she bent her knees and into an unexpectedly stylish glide across the open pavement. Hector stood in shock as she safely continued carving another turn before skating back in his direction. She pushed around some more and then took an awkward step off the board next to him. "You've done this before, haven't you?" "I have brothers. This is California. You can't avoid these things," she said, gesturing at the setup on the blacktop. "But that was better than most people look after years. How much skating have you done?" "It wasn't always cool to guys when I told them I could skate, so I tend to forget mentioning it," she replied, halfway annoyed. "Sounds like you were hanging out with some bozos, perhaps," Hector joked. "All fine ladies are permitted their bozo era, Hector," she confirmed. "Noted," he chuckled. "Come on, you remember the early 2000s," she joked. Yes, I do. I remember having to actively avoid a lot of new metal as a child. But more importantly, do you have a board of your own?" "No," she answered. "Well, we gotta change that," he smiled as Frankie rolled her eyes. The Earth's atmosphere began to provide the golden light of sunset. A school faculty member locked the open gate they'd entered earlier, so they climbed the high fence with the help of an upside-down trash can. Frankie suggested stopping into a gas station for tall cans of beer before the long drive back to Pasadena. Hector pulled into a fill station and grabbed 2 Pacificos and a bag of chips as Frankie scrolled on her phone near the gas pumps. The cool aluminum cans chilled Frankie's fingers as Hector put the car in park outside an unfinished housing tract.